You are listening to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast Network. For more great filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, head over to ifhpodcastnetwork.com. Today's show is sponsored by Rise of the Filmtrepreneur, how to turn your independent film into a profitable business. It's harder today than ever before for independent filmmakers to make money with their films. From predatory film distributors ripping them off to huckster film aggregators who prey upon them, the odds are stacked against the indie filmmaker. In Rise of the Filmtrepreneur, I break down how to actually make money with your film projects and show you how to turn your indie film into a profitable business. With case studies examining successes and failures, this book shows you the step-by-step method to turn your passion into a profitable career. The book is available in paperback, ebook, and of course, audiobook. If you want to order it, just head over to www.filmbizbook.com. That's filmbizbook.com.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the Indie Film Academy podcast. Today, we're talking with John Trigonis, film campaign specialist at Indiegogo, and he's going to share with us all the secrets that you need to have a successful Indiegogo campaign. So let's get it on.
Welcome to the Indie Film Academy podcast, where it's all about learning how to make and market your independent film online. And now your host, Jason Buff.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on the Indie Film Academy podcast. I'm really excited because today is the second day since we launched the podcast. We were accepted by iTunes, and we have about 200 downloads so far. So it's been going really well, and I'm excited. We've got some really great feedback. And please, if you like the podcast, go onto iTunes or your iPad or whatever iDevice you have and go to our podcast. And at the top, there's an option to leave a review. So if you like the podcast, give us a good review. I don't want to twist your arm or anything, but it does help us out a little bit. And of course, go to indiefilmacademy.com and check us out there. We're constantly adding new articles and we have a free ebook that we'll give you for signing up for the newsletter. But if you've been listening to this, you already know all that stuff. Our interview today is with John Trigonis. He is a really, really awesome guy, and one of the things that he specializes in is creating or helping filmmakers have successful campaigns on Indiegogo. So I don't want to waste any more time. I'm going to go to the interview. And I just started out by asking John to talk about what makes a successful campaign on Indiegogo.
No, I mean, in a nutshell, the basics, everybody definitely knows what crowdfunding and crowdsource funding is all about these days because it's everywhere. So the basics of what makes a successful campaign is something that I talk about a lot. And really, it's quite simple. It's having what I used to call the 3 P's, which used to be pitch, perks, and promotion. These are 3 elements that every campaign needs. I recently did a TEDx talk and I changed this completely, but really they're the same things. I just made them a lot more personal. So these new 3 things that you need is the invitation, the incentives, and the interactions. And I'll just kind of dive a little bit deep into each one of those. The invitation is usually the first thing we see on a campaign page. We go there and we see the campaign's video. That is the invitation. A lot of people would say, oh, this is about, it's where you get to ask for money. Not quite, because crowdfunding isn't about asking for money. And if it is, or if you think it is, then you need to take a little while and totally erase your mind of that and then come back when you realize what it's really about. And it's about inviting the audience, the community, your fans to be a part of this film project with you. They're not giving you money for it. They're helping make it with you. And there's a whole language and element to that makes it a little easier to get that across. But again, back when they used to call it the pitch, it was too businessy because it's not about pitching. It's not like you're going to pitch to an investor. You're pitching to everyday people, which means you're inviting them. It's a little bit more personable. That's one of the most important things because that's when the film director or the producer gets to be on camera in front of everybody and telling us about his or her project and getting excited about it. And if they get excited about it, we'll get excited about it, and that'll translate to my dollar going into your campaign. That's the invitation. The incentives, everybody needs to have something. They need to get something in order to give their money, because, some of us earn it really hard, right? And, those incentives are the perks, the rewards that you're offering the campaign, the contributors to the campaign. So again, it's twofold. One, it's nice to get the t-shirt. It's nice to get the digital download and the DVD. It's pretty awesome to get a Skype conversation with the director. These are all great incentives, but the incentives actually are controlled by the campaigner, basically letting us know that that our $5, that our $50, whatever amount it is going to make a huge impact on the campaign and the film. I also like to tell people to incentivize others by letting them in on things that happen with the film, things that happen with the campaign before anybody else knows. So if you land a big actor, tell your fans, tell your audience, tell the people who've actually given you money already, because they've given their money, they've given their time. They deserve to know, because what might happen is they'll get proud that you just landed this big actor, and they'll tell their friends, and then all of a sudden those friends might contribute to the campaign because of this person. So there's so many different types of incentives to offer. Very, very important to have interesting ones. I actually have 3 types of incentives, if we get into like the perks, that every campaign should offer. I broke them down into like the definitions of TVs. So you got standard definition, which is basically your digital download, your DVD, t-shirts, any kind of merch. You have your high definition perk, which is the experience driven perk. So it's the, going to the set, being an extra, eating lunch with one of the filmmakers, etc. And then you have the 3-dimensional perks, which are basically perks that are personalized towards the funders. So again, something like an Instagram thank you video. That's something that Don Cheadle actually did for his Indiegogo campaign that he ran a few months back. For a tiny price of $45, he would thank 20 people in separate Instagram videos, and it's pretty awesome because there's a connection there that says, I, John Trigonis, am a part of this film and this campaign. Huge incentive right there for people. The last one, the last of these, what I call the 3 ins now. The invitation, the incentives, and now we have the interactions. This one, I think, is the most important thing ever. And the interactions part starts way before the campaigning starts. Because the interactions is all about social media. And without social media, crowdfunding would not exist to this day. So basically, it's about giving value on Facebook, on Twitter, on Google Plus, whenever it, finally kicks in. If you're cool with LinkedIn, on LinkedIn, Reddit, whatever platforms you're used to and you're comfortable with, get on them, talk to people, interact with them. Don't just, come campaign time, it's all about promotion like I used to call it, which really basically means you're a blowhorn. You're just blowing about your campaign, and then that gets old really fast. Even the most creative kind of, promotion can get really old fast. So when you interact with people, interaction is what I'm seeing that leads to actual conversion. Conversion being, I look at your campaign and I actually contribute, because you got me. So the more you talk to people, the better it is. They get excited. They feel like they're special. This is something that I learned actually, at Indiegogo. Some of our best campaigners are YouTube stars. And the reason is really simple. They've done the legwork of the interaction for at least 5 to 10 years already. They've been doing it. They've got an audience. It's a massive audience. It's a passionate fan base. And they've been given stuff for free all those years. But that's not the reason why those fans automatically fund these projects from the YouTubers. The reason is simple. The YouTubers, and I heard it from their mouths, a bunch of big YouTubers, They said, we interact with our fan base. If they like a video, we say thanks so much for watching. If they don't like a video, we say, oh man, sorry I didn't like this one. Hopefully the next one will be better. What didn't you like? They talk, they get information. They basically crowdsource information from people to maybe make better videos, or maybe they're just saying like, bunch of trolls. I don't know. But the fact is, troll or hardcore fan, they're talking to them. And that makes all the difference in crowdfunding because you're doing all that legwork. Most filmmakers, that's the one thing, again, those three things make a successful campaign. What makes an unsuccessful campaign is the filmmaker who just kind of goes out there, he just launched a Twitter account 2 days ago. He just started talking about his campaign on Facebook 5 days ago, or his project 5 days ago. And now he's asking us for money, and that's how it's coming across because you haven't courted us. I equate it to dating in a lot of ways. It's like you don't go on a date and a blind date and, ask the other person to pay, like right away because you forgot your wallet. It's just, you don't. And if it does, maybe it does happen. I don't know. I'm new to the whole, I'm lucky to have a fiance, so I never had to deal with Tinder and blind dates and all that kind of stuff. Right. I'm very thankful about that. But I assume that, most people will get together and, you do a little fighting over the check. You have a good time. And then ultimately, you want to pay, and that's the contributor in that sense. You had such a good time with this campaign, talking to this person, you want to pay. It's that legwork that's missing in some of the more unsuccessful campaigns. 9 out of 10 times, that's what I find. And I work with a lot of campaigns, most of them, nice and successful in terms of like hitting the goal and going above it. But then there are some that, maybe they just don't have the social media to be able to get $10,000 or $25,000, but they could have maybe gotten $5,000. And that leads me to the other big mistake that like unsuccessful campaigners make more often than I would like to admit is they set too high a goal. And this is like something that, I'll be honest, it hurts me when I see it because I've seen so many good campaigns. They're fun. The filmmakers are really awesome. They've got a great campaign video. The incentives are awesome. They actually do interact with their fan base. It's just they don't have a big enough fan base to get to $100,000. So they end up raising $10,000 or $20,000. And it's successful because, again, with Indiegogo, you have the option to keep that. But at the end of the day, we want it to hit the goal, which means, and I tell people this a lot, the goal is a meaningless thing in our minds. In the grand scheme of things, it's like the one thing that people see and they prematurely judge it whether a campaign is successful or not based on whether or not they hit that goal. But the goal doesn't matter. We have to ask ourselves as filmmakers, what can we commit to raising? Because a commitment to raise money is much stronger than setting a goal to raise money. Because the goal could be $50,000, but maybe I can only get $2,000 from my family and friends, which means if I do my math of like, I tell people you have to get about you're going to look to get 30% of whatever amount you want to raise from your friends and family. So if you can only secure $2,000 from your family, multiply that by 3, set your goal for like $6,000 or $8,000. And then you're going to work really hard to hit that goal. You're going to commit to hitting that goal. And then what happens is if you can hit that goal in half the time, you can then probably raise more. Because once a goal is hit, you actually raise more money. Which sounds totally like that's the reverse psychology thing right there. Because it's like, wouldn't people say, they hit their goal, they don't need any more money. Nope. People will still give money. I was one of the earliest examples of this, and it literally just it didn't literally blow my mind, because I'd be dead, but, it figuratively blew my mind and made me really sit back and think about crowdfunding in a very different way. Because I'm like, nobody's going to keep giving me after I hit my $5,000 goal. I raised, just for background, I raised, $6,300 back in 2010 for a short film I did called Cerise, back when crowdfunding was nothing like what it is today. And, my campaign was talked about a lot, and people took a lot of interest in it because it did a lot of things right in a time when most campaigns weren't anything special. It was just kind of like campaigning, and that was it, and you forget about it. And I remember when I hit my goal, I did this funny thing where I was like, I'm done. I said I wanted 5,000. I got 5,000. I'm finished. I'm not going to ask anybody for any more. And I had a whole other month ahead of me. But back then I didn't know about things called stretch goals, and I didn't understand fundraising. So I just let my campaign sit there lifeless. Only thing, it wasn't lifeless. People in the course of that month gave me an extra $1,300, and I did not send one tweet. I did not send a Facebook update. I did nothing. These were people that were stumbling onto Indiegogo, finding my campaign, checking out my video, and saying, I want to be a part of this campaign, even though I was already fully funded to my goal. Blew my mind.
Right.
Still blows my mind.
If you don't mind, if we can rewind for just a second, a lot of people are probably at the phase right now of putting together their project, but really not having much of a presence. They might have a Facebook account or a Twitter account or whatever. But first of all, what people should be using crowdsourcing and what people shouldn't be using it? What projects are most, best served by a crowdsourcing campaign?
Oh, it's great. So I'm going to be very vague and say, I think crowdfunding is for everyone. I think it can be for everyone. It's just, we have to be realistic in our expectations of it. Still to this day, a lot of filmmakers especially, they erroneously look at the crowdfunding as the money tree, right? It's like, if I put my campaign up, people are going to go to it and they're going to fund it. It just absolutely does not happen. I've yet to see it happen. In that sense, even the big campaigns, and we all know what those ones were, those were not strangers. Those were people that had huge, these were campaigns that had huge fan bases, and those fan bases might as well have been family to those like shows like Veronica Mars and all those, So it's all, the thing is to be really realistic. Let's say, you have a film and you need $10 million. Well, you're not going to raise $10 million on any platform out there. It's just not going to happen right now. 5 years from now, 2 years from now, maybe. So we have to think, what can I use X amount of money for? So you take your campaign, you need $10 million. Well, maybe I can raise $200,000 for pre-production and post-production. Now I'm talking big numbers, and I probably should talk smaller numbers. So I'm going to drop that down. Let's say you need, because my big pet peeve is like seeing films that are want to raise $200,000 and they don't have the social capital to actually cash in to be able to reach that. No matter how good the strategy.
Can you talk just a little bit? I mean, you're talking about, you need to have a following. How specifically do you go about building a following? I mean, what are the ways that people can get people that are, supporting their film and finding the right people that are going to actually come to support them when finally the project rolls around?
That's perfect. The easy answer to that is you want to make a delineation between your audience and your community. So again, as indie filmmakers, the indie film community on social media is huge, it's strong, it's powerful. They're going to support us as long as we support one another. That's why there's a hashtag on Twitter, support indie film. It exists for a reason, to help crowdfunding campaigns, raise money and do all that stuff by just being able to share it and tap into that audience. But we have to kind of back and forth with it. But that may not be where all of the funding is going to come from, because sometimes your indie film community is not your audience for the film. Case in point, if you take a documentary, any documentary, a documentary about medical marijuana, let's say, just because it's on the top of my head. The indie film community is going to help you out. The documentary film community will help you out. They'll get you to a certain point, but ultimately they may never watch your film. Because maybe they just don't care about that subject matter. So you have to tap into the actual audience that cares about the subject matter of your film as well as the indie film community. Sometimes they're similar, sometimes they're completely different. So that's the one way to do it, and that's during the campaigning beforehand in the sense of like a documentary or even a horror movie. You have to be a part of that community and that world. So I usually tell people who are on social, if you're a horror filmmaker and you're not reading Bloody Disgusting, you're not reading Twitch Film, you're not reading Rue Morgue and all these other horror-centric blogs or the places that write about horror a lot, you're probably not taking it serious as being a horror filmmaker. Because you need to be in those worlds. You need to be reading those articles. You need to retweet those articles because that's going to tap into a bigger fan base. And then they'll check your Twitter profile and they'll say, wow, this person's a horror filmmaker. I wonder what he or she's done. And they'll want to check you out. And then all of a sudden they check you out and you've got a campaign. They might fund it because you tapped into their audience. A lot of work because it's a lot of reading. It's a lot of diving in. It's a lot of community building. But it pays off in the end. Another case in point, a big case about, the importance of the audience and the community building is, most recently I don't know if you've heard of the Iron Sky, movies. Well, movie. No. There's one movie right now. It's basically this spoofed sci-fi crazy, space adventure, about Nazis on the moon. And it's just total farce, total fun, crazy. Well, they crowdfunded that film a long time ago on their own website. Got a fan base involved. I think they raised upwards of $1 million. I'm not 100% sure of the number because it was a while ago and on no platform. But they came to Indiegogo. They raised last year they raised $182,000 for pre-production and script writing for the next episode, the sequel to Iron Sky. And then most recently, they just raised $561,000 to produce part of the film, not all of the film, because they secured funding to make the movie, because it's going to be a multi-million-dollar thing. But they've got a big chunk of it from their fan base who is tirelessly ready to give money and give funding because they interact with that fan base. The Iron Sky folks, they talk to them. They are a part of that community and that fan base. But again, they're constantly putting out material that benefits everybody. So again, most recently, I think it came out the day before yesterday, they wrote a gigantic blog post that is filled with some of the best crowdfunding advice I've ever read. And I knew it all because I basically helped them through with their whole campaign. So I knew everything, but they wrote it and they shared it for other people to be able to crowdfund the way they did. And it's just, that's that sense of community, and that ultimately, builds a strong enough base where you can actually raise, the bigger amounts of money each time, just like a campaign like they did. The average person, who's just like the indie filmmaker, they need to raise $25,000. All they got to do is just similar stuff. Is start by giving people value, sharing blogs, sharing articles, talking with other filmmakers, taking an interest in their project, then they'll take an interest in your project, and just really having people laugh at me when I say it, when I tell them, and give them homework for Twitter, and I say, go on Twitter and have fun. And they look at me like I'm totally off my rocker, and I probably am a little bit. But I'm on Twitter and I have a good time. I read articles and I'm like, dude, that's cool, and I share it right away. I don't read anything unless I have an intention to tweet it these days, because I'm only going to read stuff that I know will benefit me and that will benefit the people who are like me, which is my community. So that's a big thing that everybody should do. Going back to that whole thing about who should and who shouldn't crowdfund, I mean, the person who's not doing this probably shouldn't crowdfund right now, because this is the ultimate testament, because it's almost like a primer for crowdfunding, social media 101. It's a primer to actually, number one, crowdfunding your film, but more importantly, marketing your film later on down the line, because as independent filmmakers, nobody's going to market these films except us. So we might as well get a head start before the campaign and just, go on Twitter and talk to people and have a good time.
Okay, now when you're starting a campaign, what assets do you kind of need to have ready and in place as you're starting a campaign? What do you need to put together, the specifics of just putting a campaign together?
Awesome. Basically, all three of the other two ins, as I call them, the invitation, mainly the video, and your incentives or your perks or your rewards. You should be putting those two things together. The campaign video is an interesting thing. There's still this thing where some filmmakers don't want to go in front of the camera and quote, ask for money. But as I said before, it's not really asking for money. But they, once they get through with that whole idea of asking for money, then it becomes a little easier. But it's a very important thing because at the end of the day, people are going to give to people, not the film. They're going to give to the people behind the film, which means we have to come out from behind the film and invite everybody to be a part of it with us. So that's the one thing they should have set up. Really simple stuff. I wrote about it in my book. I wrote about it in a couple of blog posts of the simplest way to break up a campaign video. Introduction, the actual invitation. The introduction is just who you are in 10 seconds, or 15 maybe. Then the invitation, which basically tells people what you're doing, what your film is about, and why they should care enough to be a part of it. Then you want to do a little bit of a showcase of your other film work that you've done. Because in today's world, everybody's a filmmaker. On your iPhone, you're a filmmaker, and using the red, dragon, you're a filmmaker too, and there's no delineation anymore, no matter what people think. So if we're asking for, a couple of $1,000, totally fine. You can be an iPhone filmmaker and you might get to, $2,000. But if you want to raise $50,000 or more, you need to show us that you're worth more than $5 latte money, that you might be worth $50 and more from us if we really get attached to your project and you as a filmmaker. So show us beautiful images, show us what you can do. If you've got laurels, put them in there and tell us that you've been at this festival. Doesn't matter how small or big the festival is, just put them in there. And then after that, there's a slight call to action. We got, just like in a director's, in the movie itself, the director calls action. Well, we need to call action to tell people what we expect them to do when they finish watching our video, which should never go above 3 minutes. The videos now, I'm actually trying to get people to get them about 2 minutes, maybe 2:20, 2:30 tops, because the attention span dwindles. We need to get on the page, see the video quick, and get off of your page even more quickly, but we need to get off your page, your crowdfunding page, as a contributor. That's the key thing, and that's where the incentives come in. The incentives, getting those together is a little bit challenging. The standard definition perks, like I mentioned before, they're easy. I never tell people to do t-shirts because it costs a lot of money to do t-shirts. But if you want to do a mug, if you want to do some kind of merch and it's affordable, then do it. That's fine. But definitely the digital download, definitely the DVD until they go extinct. And definitely, more importantly than those are the high definition, the 3D perks, which are the experiences and the personalized ones. And those take a little bit of thought. So that's why I tell people really sit down, take the time, come up with a bunch. Don't worry about how much work they're going to be because they're going to be work. I had a friend of mine who, he ran a campaign for a movie called 20 Million People. One of his perks was he would write you a choose-your-own-adventure style romantic comedy in 3 acts. He would write your own. And it's an awesome perk. I totally didn't even flinch at it. I was like, that's mine. And it was great. It was a great perk. Let me ask you a quick question. How much do you think that would be worth?
Wow, I don't know. I mean, like $1,000 or something?
Oh, so that's great. He did 60 of these. I'm just throwing that out there. He wrote 60 of these.
Wow. Okay.
And here's the thing.
The problem.
Big problem. A lot of work, right?
Right.
But here's the crazy thing. Hold on to your seat, though, Jason, because it's crazy. He did these for $25 a piece.
Mm-hmm.
$25. That's the reason he sold 60 of them, because it was stupid for any contributor not to jump at that. At $1,000, he never would have sold one. At $100, I think he probably would have sold 4 to 5, maybe, and that's about it. Because overvaluing the art, you offer more value for less money, and again, it's going to cost him time. But time is free when you're crowdfunding. You're not going to get paid your daily rate. You're not going to get paid a rate at all. Your rate is the success that your campaign will be at the end of the day. Crazy.
What are some of the campaigns that have just kind of blown you away in terms of their creativity and some of the more interesting incentives that people have offered that actually work?
Totally. I mean, to be honest, that one was one of the top ones. I mean, I've worked with a lot of big campaigns, and this question, unfortunately, it's a little biased because a lot of the time, I'm going to toot my horn a little bit. I'm the guy that comes up with a lot of those perks that they do. I fight with the filmmakers a little bit, because I'm like, trust me on this, and they do it and they sell out of the perk because it's so cool. A case in point is like the Don Cheadle Instagram thank you video. Like I kind of got them to do that, but it took a lot. And their merchandise, they did a great campaign, but the merchandise stuff that they thought was going to sell out real fast, it took a while. And I said, like, get personal, get Don to do thank you videos, limit them, and do it dirt cheap, $45, sold out, So I'm a little biased with some of them, so I'm going to think back to the ones that I didn't have anything to do with. And the cool thing is they're usually the smaller campaigns, like the ones that are raising like $5,000 to $25,000. A friend of mine did ukulele songs. Tim Sparks did a campaign for a movie called Around Here. Yeah, ukulele songs. I think they were $20. Again, I didn't even think twice about it. I said, wow, ukulele song. I want one of those. And I did it, and each one was personalized. And I think I talked to him a couple of weeks ago. I thought he did like maybe 50 of them. He actually told me he did I think it was around 90 or a little over 100 of them, and it's like, and he wrote them specifically for people. You look at mine and it's like, he's the crowdfunding man. And I'm like, oh my God, that's totally personalized. And in my head I'm saying, I probably would have paid $50 to get that, but the fact that he did 20, he sold a bunch. And again, crowdfunding is the complete opposite of the traditional model, right? Traditional model, big amounts of money, 3 people give it to you, right? Or, investors give it to you. And then you got to pay them back anyway with interest. Whereas crowdfunding is small amounts of money from massive amounts of people that you never have to pay those people back except give them a t-shirt, give them a DVD. There's the power. So you put in that little bit of extra elbow grease like Tim did and like my friend Michael did who did that 20 million people campaign. You reap the benefits. Yes, you're going to be tired at the end of it because you're going to be probably fulfilling perks for quite a while. But those are my 2 favorites that I had nothing to do with. And when I saw them, I just got excited and I couldn't even contain it. So I constantly use those guys as examples, but there's a lot of them. I mean, the Iron Sky guys, they also did a lot of them and they're fresh in my mind because their campaign just ended, but they were selling things like, get eaten by a dinosaur, run away from the dinosaur, there's dinosaurs in the sequel. Really, really scary ones too, like Jurassic Park type dinosaurs. It's pretty awesome. Those things were going because again, those were expensive perks. Like you weren't going to get eaten by a dinosaur for $50 because they got to fly you to Finland to shoot and all this other stuff. But their fan base is so much more massive than the general public that there will be, out of those thousands of people who, actually probably millions of people who love this film, they're going to find some of them who have $5,000 or $10,000 to say, you know what? Yeah, this is worth it. And that's the key thing, is just kind of like knowing that audience and figuring out what they want too. And just having a good time with them. I'm all about having a good time, Jason, when you're crowdfunding.
I can hear that.
I mean, not to quote the terrible thing, but like the word fun is in the word crowdfunding. So if you're taking it too serious, you shouldn't be doing crowdfunding,
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that you mentioned is, people discovering projects and things like that. What are the kind of the ratios of people? Let's focus for a second on kind of smaller projects in the under $100,000 range, for example.
Awesome.
How does it broken up? Are there people that are just discovering these projects on Indiegogo, or are the majority of people like coming from Twitter or coming from like a mailing list or whatever? Or are a lot of people just like family members or whatever? How is it usually typically broken up, or is it kind of all over the map?
No, that's a great one. Basically, so like I said before, like we have that thing, the 30% rule, right? And it's not a rule, but it's what we see time and time again here, me and the film team, is that the 30% mark is the threshold, talking in Joseph Campbell terms here. That's the threshold before you enter the new world of the rest of the world who is going to fund your film. But the people that are going to get you to that 30% are going to be family, friends, diehard supporters if you've got them. And I mean diehard, like really like they're just they don't necessarily know you, but they love your film and they like every status about your film. But then when you post a picture of your cat, they ignore it completely. That's a diehard fan. So they're going to get you. That's where the bulk of the money is going to come from. From that and from the campaigners' email list. This is what we see time and time again. Email brings in the most conversion because crowdfunding starts with us. And then once we build up specific momentum, that's when the rest of the people, the strangers, as we'll call them in quotes, will start taking notice of the campaign. And that's usually through Twitter, Facebook, other forms of social media, press. If you get written up in a blog and you spread that blog around, people will see it because of that, and they might check out your campaign. The one thing that, the people on Twitter, Facebook, and blogs and press are going to want to see when they get to the campaign page is the momentum. Nobody, I use the analogy, like the film analogy, right? I love movies about underdogs. Like, I don't want to see a movie about a rich person who's, having a problem. I don't care. Like, you can buy your way out of it, But I want to see the underdog struggling, getting up there. I know it sounds terrible, right? I'm sorry. But again, the thing about the underdog that we sometimes forget is that, well, we don't really care about the underdog unless he or she's winning. Because if they start out as a loser at the beginning of the movie and by the end of the movie they end up a loser still, well, we don't really care about them anymore and we wasted our journey. So we need to show that they have that momentum, that possibility to become something great. Same thing with a campaign. This is what people look at. When you go to like an Indiegogo campaign and even on other sites, you see there's like a bar, and we call it the green bar, and we have something we call the green bar effect. And that basically says that when there's more green, there's more momentum, and when there's more green, more people are going to want to jump on board that green line because the campaign looks like a winner, and everybody wants to fund a winner. When you look at a campaign that wants to raise $50,000 and they've only got $2,000, and it hasn't moved in a day and a half, it doesn't give us psychologically any feeling that this is going to be successful. We have doubt. And then we might say, you know what, I'll come back later. Maybe it'll have some momentum because that's what we're looking for. But the bad thing is they tend not to come back because they forget because you didn't make an impact when they went to your campaign from whatever blog wrote about you. So that's the key thing about that. Getting the money in from family and friends, then the email, I don't like to use the word mass email. It should be like a more personalized email that goes out to your ultimate email user base. And then constant promoting on Facebook, constant promoting on Twitter, in between talking about other things that you would normally talk about. All of this, Jason, equals full-time job for the duration of the campaign. But then once you cross that threshold, right, the 30% threshold, and you start really getting other people on board, amazing things can happen. And again, I see it all the time with campaigns, like Iron Sky all the way down to 20 million people, which again, that was a $25,000 campaign, and they raised over their goal on that one. So, or I think it was a $10,000 campaign. It was a $10,000 campaign, and they raised like $13,000. But again, part of it was just a lot of that hard work. But again, most of it came from their immediate base of users via email and family and friends, and then here and there on Facebook and Twitter.
Are there any tricks to kind of getting in press and getting on websites that are influential and might bring more fans to you?
I think there is. In my book I have like a chapter that says it's like there's a whole bunch of gotta haves when you're trying to raise, like, I think it's $30K and up, I wrote back then. And it's, the thing to have to get into press is you gotta have a gimmick nowadays. And a gimmick, I probably should use the word angle, but I like the word gimmick because it makes me feel all film noir. But you gotta have a gimmick, and a gimmick is a good word to me. It just means you're not just feeling special because you launched another campaign. You are another filmmaker among thousands that have launched a campaign on the same day as you. So there's nothing special about a filmmaker launching a campaign. What's the angle? What's it going to be? Documentary films, they got it easy. They can tap into, it's a documentary about X subject matter, and they can get those magazines and journals and websites to write about them because of the subject matter. And then they're tapping into their wider audience of people who want to see a movie about medical marijuana or the Connected Universe, which is another great campaign we've got now, that's doing some amazing things as a documentary. The other, for narrative stuff, it's what is the gimmick? There was a campaign for a movie. It's called Found Footage 3D. It's a horror movie about folks making a horror movie in 3D. And of course the movie will be in 3D. And, obviously in the film, some weird stuff happens to the filmmakers in the movie. And we all see it in 3D. And it's interesting. It was, and just by talking about it now, I'm like, man, that's so confusing. But that's the gimmick. That's the thing, the 3D angle, and it's like an inception of 3D. Like it's a 3D movie within a 3D movie. About a 3D movie. It's crazy.
Right.
So that's the kind of things that filmmakers need to think about nowadays. 5 years ago, definitely not the case. 5 years ago, you could launch a campaign, totally fine. Everybody's going to write about you. Nowadays, it's like, no big news. What's the angle? What's the story? What's different? And this is a great exercise for filmmakers for the marketing of their film later. It all goes back to like the distribution part later on. Is like crowdfunding is priming you for how to really market this film because you're going to have to use the same gimmick, the same angle to get your audience attached.
Now, does Indiegogo deal at all with anything after the funding? I mean, there's other, crowdsourcing places like Seed and Spark that actually have a platform for distribution. Is there any sort of, once the funding is done, is that kind of the end of it?
No, not at all, actually. We have a few things that we've implemented. So specifically for filmmakers, we do have partnerships with a lot of organizations. Just naming a few like IFT. We have partnerships with IDFA, a bunch of other big organizations out there that kind of help the filmmakers along in the after the campaign is over kind of stuff. We also, so that's one way we can facilitate distribution possibilities to those filmmakers. One of our partners is VHX, for example, which as you know, is kind of blowing up, in the industry. They just had a pretty good raise. And they're doing great things for independent filmmakers. So we partnered with them so that when you're done with your campaign, you might want to tap into them and we can kind of help facilitate that. The other kind of cool thing we've got is, and we just launched it, recently at CES, a couple of days ago, is, In Demand, which basically is, once your campaign is over, you can reopen the page so that people could still, let's say they missed out on the campaign to give and they still want some of the cool perks. you can basically open it up as a kind of semi-storefront and still collect contributions coming in at your leisure instead of in, oh my gosh, campaign mode, we've got, 2 days to hit the goal kind of stuff. It takes away that urgency, but it allows people and it allows the campaigners to collect funds whenever they need to. So for example, if you've finished your campaign, you've done your post-production, and now, you want to spend the festivals, you can actually say, you know what, I'm going to reopen my campaign and put up a couple of new perks and incentives and try to see if anybody wants to fund my submission to this festival or this festival and this festival. And, for that sense, it works really well for filmmakers. So, yeah, those are kind of the things that we've got now. And we've got more things in the works, all
right.
the time. We're trying to we have a nice big film team, here. So we're always kind of putting our brains together to figure out what can we do to really help filmmakers, not just with the crowdfunding, but get it out, get the film out. Because crowdfunding is just one part.
Now you mentioned working with Don Cheadle, for that, those perks and things. One of the things I think you mentioned in the book is just how Indiegogo actually is a lot more hands-on with the people that are working with them versus someplace like Kickstarter where, you had mentioned that they didn't have very great customer service or something like that. How does somebody work with you on their campaign, and what kind of process is that?
Yeah, that's the thing that I really love about working at Indiegogo is they hired me specifically to work with campaigners and make their campaigns better. Work with them to look, sometimes we can't think of some three-dimensional perks. I happen to be lucky that I'm highly creative, and if you tell me what your film's about, I've got 3 really awesome personalized perks. I've got 4 experiences for you, all lined up. Do I tell them to you right away? Probably not. I try to get you to come up with some of the good stuff. Because again, I used to be a professor, so my thing is I got the good ideas, but you got to earn it. So let's talk. Let's try to get your best ideas out. And then I'll write those down, and then I'll give you 1 or 2, and then right there we brainstorm a bit. And that's pretty, it's pretty nice because it benefits me. It just makes me feel like I'm learning stuff too, and then vice versa. So that's one way, I can come up with some perks on occasion, or I can help people figure out those perks. I give feedback on their campaign videos, because, not everybody does a great campaign video the first time around, so they send it to me, and they say, Trig, can you look at my campaign video? And I'm like, sure, I'll take a quick look, and then I'll give a quick round of feedback. Usually I get involved when the Indiegogo campaign is in draft mode. So when you have a campaign video, when you've got the story text in the body all laid out, and when you have your perks set up, and then I take a look at it, and, you have to send it to me, obviously, and I can always tell people how to send it to me, at the end of this. But yeah, you send it to me, I take a look at it, and I can send you a round of feedback, you make your corrections, you launch your campaign, and then you just put in a lot of hard work and you make it happen. I also send out a lot of resources, because I'm privileged to know a lot of great people, who do a lot of good things for the community, like, King of the Think, Productions. They have a great, book, on how to do social media right. It's called Social Media Charm School, and there's a whole section on crowdfunding in there. And it's yes, this, I'm a believer that there's no such thing as a social media guru. At least I've yet to find one. And these girls are pretty much social media gurus. They cracked my code, in that sense, because they actually get it. And if everybody read that book and if everybody understood it and put it to practice, I wouldn't have to write my own blogs about how to do social media for crowdfunding right. And I wouldn't have to tell the same thing in my email. So it's I give these, luckily they've written these things so I can just kind of send them out there to people as assets that they might not otherwise find on their own. So yeah, that's basically kind of what I do hands-on. Occasionally I can get on a phone call if the campaign is doing really well. If it's a $20,000 campaign and it's really got some momentum, I will be more than happy to jump on a phone call and be listen, here's 4 things that you may not have thought of you should probably think about doing and try that and see if it works. Luckily, 9 out of times they work, and it's like, yes, awesome. And they raise even more money, and they can make a better film, and they can tap into a larger audience, which for me is the most important thing. But yeah, that's basically how, like what I do. I also, I do seminars, I speak a lot, for Indiegogo, and also just about crowdfunding in general on how to do it properly and all that good stuff that I talked about here.
Now, can you talk for a second about the real difference between, say, Kickstarter and Indiegogo and some of the other crowdfunding sources out there?
Oh, yeah, perfect. Yeah, so, with Indiegogo, so number one is the hands-on help. That's, I think, our top thing. So the fact that when you do your campaign, you will have access to me, or you can have access to me to kind of check your stuff out and give you feedback. I believe some of the other platforms, they like to do a quick, very, and I've looked at some of the other ones, obviously, in the past, and I've seen like that they're standard kind of emails, maybe one point here and there, and that's about it. So our customer, what we call customer happiness, is top of the line, across the board on every platform right now. So, and as an extension of my job, which is a campaign specialist, we also have, the actual customer happiness team. So if you have any issue, if a filmmaker has any issues with payments or stuff like that, or they can't do something on the page, they can reach directly out to support@indiegogo.com, and they'll get back to them within 24 hours, either with a fix, or if they haven't fixed it yet, they'll at least get back to them and tell them that they're working on it, which is something that no other platform, has the record on. So that's that. The big differences with Indiegogo and Kickstarter and all the rest is the flexible and fixed fundraising models that Indiegogo offers. So, with Kickstarter, you set up a campaign, it's all or nothing. You have to hit your goal or you don't get anything. It's got its benefits. It's definitely got its downside. With Indiegogo, you have that option. We call it fixed. So, if you need that, you got it. You set a minimum threshold, you have to hit it. Or, you can do flexible fundraising, which means you keep whatever you raise because you rightfully earned it. And the only difference is really in the percentage that Indiegogo takes. So if you have a successful campaign, we take successful being one that hits its goal, you pay us 4% in both of those models, fixed and flexible. 4% once you hit your goal. In flexible, if you don't hit your goal, you still keep everything you raise, but you pay us a slightly heftier 9%. And we make it hefty so that it incentivizes the filmmakers to work even harder to make a great campaign and hit that goal. And sometimes it just means setting a goal that you can hit, that you can commit to hitting, like I mentioned earlier. That's the main difference that most folks know. On the other side of things, Indiegogo's a completely global platform. You can raise funds from any country in the world. No, except for the ones that don't like America, which is outside of it. But that's it's pretty bad. But that's much more than all of the competitors right now. So we're actually one of the only truly global platforms out there. For where you can raise money, you can be anywhere in the world and raise money, but also contribute money as well. And we have offices in most of the UK, in Canada right now. So we've got that going for us as well, where there's people actively going and helping out in those markets. And the other one too is you don't lose any money with Indiegogo, and what I mean by that, there's this thing in crowdfunding called leakage. I don't know if you've stumbled upon articles about it. I know it sounds like some weird, I think it is a weird bodily problem, sadly. I feel bad for anybody who's got it, but, in terms of crowdfunding, leakage is when you get less money than what it actually says you got. So our competitors that have what we call the soft pledge model, where you're basically just making a promise to contribute, but you're not actually making the contribution at the time of your actual contributions, not taking it out of your credit card at that moment. It's called a soft pledge. When they have that, by the end of the campaign, there's always a loss of money, sometimes as much as over 30 to 60% of your funds could actually not be there. The platforms don't advertise that. But with Indiegogo, so it still says you raised $70,000, but in essence you only got $40,000 because there was $30,000 that was lost because people they were like, what's this transaction? Cancel. They don't remember it. If they contributed at the beginning of the campaign and 2 months go by and, it's done. But with Indiegogo, there is no leakage because we take the money right at the time of the contribution, right at the time of that transaction. So whatever money you get, it's reflected in the amount. That's the money you get minus our fees and the credit card and PayPal tax fees as well. So that's another big one that is becoming more and more prevalent because we're seeing a lot more folks coming, telling Indiegogo about like their leakage experiences. That sounds really bad. But you get what I'm saying. But they'll actually come to us and be like, hey, we raised money on this other platform, but now we're on Indiegogo because we lost X amount in this leakage thing that we have to get back, and then they use Indiegogo because they know they'll get 100% of that.
Do you ever hear about people using multiple platforms for the same project?
I get that question on occasion. Yeah. My advice is always, look, pick a platform. Obviously people should pick Indiegogo because we're awesome. But pick a platform that you're going to be able to utilize every tool that they've got, at your disposal and stick to it. That's the key thing because the misconception, a lot of misconception is like, oh, well, Kickstarter's got more, traffic or something like that. And, and again, that stuff isn't true in that sense. But like there's the perception of that kind of stuff. So they'll be like, oh, but Indiegogo's got its own set of things. So I'll just do my same project on both. Number one, it looks a little weird if you have it on both for people because they'll be like, which one's real? Then they start they start questioning things, But at the same time, at the real end of the day, you're doing double the work because the fact is the people who are going to contribute to your campaign are going to go wherever you tell them to go. Right. Which is why there's other niche platforms out there that nobody's ever heard of. But if you've got a good enough project and you can sell it, in that passionate way that you love your project, you can get them to go to the tiniest website or the hugest website. It all depends on you and your project.
Now, real quick, because we're almost out of time here, I just wanted to ask something that I had forgotten, which is talking about a campaign. Now, what is the typical lifespan of a campaign? Like, how long does one typically last? And are there good times, are there times that you should avoid a campaign and, during times, like holidays or whatever? What's like the best time scale of beginning and ending, and how long do they usually last?
That's great. What we find, like statistically, across the board at Indiegogo, and again, across the board meaning like for film, tech projects, all of the different types of projects we work with, we see that 21 to 45 days is usually like the sweet spot. With Indiegogo, you can actually do up to 60 days of a campaign. I very rarely see like 60 days because, number one, it is a long time. It's like, 2 full months of like hardcore campaigning. So unless you have a set strategy planned out, you may actually tire your audience out. More importantly, you may tire yourself out because, if 3 days go by in the middle of the campaign when you hit the lull, you might be like, oh my God, this is so depressing. Why hasn't one contribution come in? And you have a bigger chance of losing your momentum, and we don't want that. So what I see with film campaigns is 30 to 45 days is a really good frame to like work it because a minimum of 30, you can raise $10,000 in 30 days. I think almost anybody with a halfway decent social media following and a decently sized family and friend base, you can definitely raise $10,000 in 30 days, sometimes more. So again, 30 to 45, and all those other factors is a really good amount of time. In terms of like when not to run a campaign, I mean, there's no bad time. You want to be careful, obviously, of the holidays. Christmas time gets, it can be slow on occasion, But what we find actually, and it was the case with this, is like, it was a very good month for crowdfunding for us because there were a lot of campaigns raising funds and people are in the giving spirit. Probably the not so best time to run a campaign is directly after New Year's. That's when everybody is catching up fund-wise because they've spent all their money on parties, on presents, and on the holidays. They've traveled, they're tapped out a little bit. You probably do a campaign somewhere after the 15th when everybody gets paid of January. And then from then on, it's usually pretty good. And again, dependent on how much money you're looking to raise and how much time you have to actually put into the campaign and the size of the audience that you're already bringing to the plate.
Now, can you talk for 1 second about what happens during the actual campaign in terms of keeping people updated and then offering new incentives as you go along? Is that something that's fairly common to keep adding things as you're going, or do you kind of keep it static?
No, actually, yes. Sorry, I totally just said no and yes. Sorry, let me backtrack. It's becoming much more common and almost completely commonplace to actually offer new perks through the campaign. Basically, in a nutshell, to strategize the campaign. Back in 2010, totally fine. Set up your campaign, leave it the way it is. I did. I raised $6,300, and $5,000 in half the time. So it's like, back then is a different time. Today, yes, it's about what I call campaign mode. Once you launch this thing, this is your life. This is what you're living. This is what you're going to breathe. Yeah, you've got your full-time job. You've got your significant others. You got your kids. You've got all this other stuff. But when you're not with them, you are campaigning for hours at a time in the course of the day, and you want to plan out a strategy so that you know that on this date, you're going to launch a new video. On this date, you're going to do a referral contest, which is something that's exclusive to Indiegogo, where you get to refer people to, your funders can refer people to the campaign for the chance to get or earn an awesome new perk that they can get just simply by getting their friends to contribute. Things like that makes the campaign up. It makes it exciting, especially once it hits the lull. And the lull, again, is that time of a campaign, usually in the middle, where you have a strong start, and then every day you get less and less money coming in, totally normal. And there's going to be a day where you could possibly go without a contribution unless you strategize it, unless you plan out. This perk is going to go out on this day, and we're going to blast it on social media. Iron Sky, again, they did a massively awesome job. They did a lot of the content creation before the campaign, which I always recommend. They released 2 videos, 2 really fun, awesome, high production value videos for the campaign specifically about when they were introducing some characters from the movie. So when they launched those, the amounts of contributions spiked each time. And then every day it was they would launch a new perk every week and they would make a big splash about it and then people would totally jump on board it. So you want to again, it's like anything. It's pre-production for a campaign. Plan all that stuff out, set up the calendar, then go with the calendar, and then add to the calendar as it goes on. That's the smartest thing that any filmmaker can do, or any campaigner can do for that matter.
Well, that's about all I have for the questions. Can you tell people how to get in touch with you and maybe, give your Twitter address or anything you'd like to put out there?
Oh, well, I wouldn't be me, Jason, without giving my Twitter address. Yeah, definitely. So my Twitter is very simple. It's just my last name, Trigonis, Trigonis, for those listening in. And again, if you're setting up an Indiegogo campaign and you've got a campaign that's in the draft mode, you've got your video, you've got perks in there, and you've got a good story, send it to me at Trig, which is TRIG @Indiegogo.com. and then I will always get back to my emails.
And there's always also your book, right?
Yes. Thank you for reminding me, because I'm such a terrible salesperson some days. But yeah, thank you. No, believe me, I should probably get you on the payroll, brother. But definitely, yes. And you guys can get my book, Crowdfunding for Filmmakers: Way to a Successful Film Campaign, which is available on Amazon, as print, as Kindle. It's also available as a Nook book. I just realized like 2 months ago. So if you're a Barnes & Noble fan and you got a Nook, you can get it there. And I think it's available on a bunch of other sites that I don't know of. I hope you still have to pay, because it's nice when I get that little 10% royalty. And then you can also get it, I think you can still get it, you might be able to still get it at Michael Weesey, the publishers, MWP.com, at 25% off. If not, Amazon gives you a nice little discount anyway.
Well, great, man. I really appreciate it, and thanks for coming on with us and talking about that. Yeah,
man. Thanks for having me. I truly appreciate it. Any chance that I get to spread the message and to the world is an awesome thing. And so thank you. It's a big privilege to be able to do this with you.
All right. I want to thank John Trigonis for coming on and telling us all this great stuff about Indiegogo. As always, if you like the podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review. That really, really helps us out and keeps us going and lets us know. I don't, always know if people are liking what we're putting out, or if there's stuff that you want to, hear, or there's interviews, or there's some topic about filmmaking that we haven't covered. There's still a lot to cover, and I'm going to start leaning more towards like production side things and things that you need to know on the set, and hopefully talking with gaffers and first ADs and people that work on a film set, so that you get an idea of the things you need to know when you actually are on a film set and you don't want to, look like a complete rube. Is that a word? Okay, I'm going to stick with it. Rube. All right, guys. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Academy podcast. Don't forget to join our newsletter for more tips and tricks on how to make and market your film online. Go to www.indiefilmacademy.com.